The silver fork slipped from Martha's hand and struck the porcelain plate, the sharp sound cutting through the bright, polished dining room. "Tell me," Mom Brandon said, swirling his glass of Pinot Red, the smirk on his lips cold as steel. "How does it feel to be old and useless?" Laughter rippled around the table. Only Martha sat still, her gray eyes gleaming in the candlelight. The aroma of the lobster stew she had made lingered faintly, but now the air tasted of bitterness. "No job, no purpose," Brandon went on, his voice smooth but stinging. "You must spend your days just sitting around, huh?" Each word fell like a small blade cutting into the dignity of the woman who had once saved hundreds of lives. Martha set her fork down, lifted her chin, and looked directly at him. "How interesting," she said slowly, her voice quiet but firm, "because I was just wondering how it feels to know that as of today, this useless woman will no longer be paying for your luxurious life." The room froze. The laughter died instantly. The color drained from Brandon's face. Lena gripped her wine glass tightly, forcing a nervous smile. Their children, Mia and Owen, looked at each other confused. "Mom, please," Lena whispered. "This is supposed to be a celebration." Martha looked at her daughter, her expression tired yet tender. "Sometimes my dear people need a shock to wake up from a 12-year sleep." Brandon laughed awkwardly. "What's that supposed to mean?" Martha didn't answer. She calmly wiped her mouth with a napkin. "Are you threatening me?" he demanded. "No," she replied softly. "I'm just done saving you." The wine glass tipped red liquid spilling across the white tablecloth, like blood. "I built this family with hard work, without anyone's charity," Brandon shouted. Martha tilted her head, her smile thin and sharp. "Really? This house, that car, your children's school fees, all paid from the money I've sent for the past 12 years. Lena's face went pale. "Mom, please don't." "I don't wish to humiliate anyone," Martha said gently. "I just want people to remember who's been paying for dinners like this." Silence stretched so long that the only sound was the ticking clock on the wall. Brandon swallowed hard. "You think we can't live without you?" "No," Martha said, rising slowly, her shadow stretching tall across the wall. "I just want to see how you live when you finally rely on yourselves." Lena began to cry. "Mom, please don't do this." Martha looked down at her pain flickering in her eyes. "You've forgotten who stayed up with you the night the bank nearly took your first house. Forgotten who paid the hospital bills when Mia was born early. I never asked for thanks, only a little respect." Brandon slammed his napkin on the table. "If you want to walk away, fine. We don't need you." Martha smiled faintly. "You might want to tell that to the bank, the car dealer, and the school. They'll remind you whose name is on the payments." Turning to her grandchildren, her voice softened. "Thank you both for dinner. The fish was delicious." Mia nodded and Owen stared after her wide-eyed. Martha slipped on her coat and stepped out of the bright house, leaving behind a silence heavy as stone. Outside, the rain had stopped. The night breeze carried the scent of salt and wet pine. She unlocked her car, sat behind the wheel, and gripped the steering wheel tightly. The rhythmic roll of the tires on the wet road matched the steady beat of her heart, calm amid the storm inside her. She thought of every transfer, every promise made to her late husband, help them until they're stable. But 12 years had passed, and stability never came, only entitlement. When she reached home, it was barely 8:30. She didn't turn on the lights, only sat in the car, staring at the faint glow from her window. Her house was small and quiet, free from fake laughter or empty boasting. The anger drained away, leaving a cold clarity. Inside, Martha switched on the lamp in the living room. The golden light fell across a framed photo, her in her nurse's uniform, smiling with exhaustion and pride. "Useless," she murmured. None of them knew that every mortgage tuition payment and living expense had been under her name. From the tuition at Magnolia Academy to the car loan, every payment came from her accounts. She opened her desk drawer and pulled out a worn notebook, its pages filled with neat handwriting housecar school medical. 12 years, over $800,000, each figure a cut of trust. She drew a steady line under the last entry and wrote a final note. Tomorrow stop all transfers. The wind outside rustled through the trees, blending with the faint scent of old paper. Martha looked up at the ceiling, her face calm eyes reflecting the strength. No one at that dinner table had ever seen the strength of a woman who had carried an entire family and who now was ready to let them stand on their own. From tonight onward, their lives and hers would begin a new chapter. The warm glow of a desk lamp spread across the wooden surface, casting a small circle of light in the dark room. Martha sat at her desk so still that she could hear the ticking of the clock. Outside, the ocean wind brushed against the house, making the curtains sway gently. The faint scent of varnished wood mixed with the smell of old paper, the scent of the past of discipline, of a woman who had lived by order and duty. She opened the third drawer on the right where folders were arranged by color blue, for the house payments, green for the car, yellow for tuition, red for medical bills, and purple for Lena and Brandon's vacations. Each folder was a fragment of memory, the temporary help that had stretched for 12 long years. The first file was marked 2013, just a few months after Anthony had died. By his hospital bed, she had promised, "I'll help them until they're stable." That promise had become a chain around her neck, tightening with every year that passed. Martha opened the first page. The bank transfer record showed $2,200. The next month, the same amount, and then again and again, steady as a heartbeat. She turned the pages, stopping at 56 identical slips. Each one was a month, each month another piece of her life chipped away. Then came the car payments. Brandon had once said, "You need a good car to keep the kids safe." The Ford became a Lexus, then a glossy black SUV. Martha had co-signed the loan, paying $850 a month for 10 years. A small number, he'd said, but over time it had piled into a mountain only she knew existed. Then there was the tuition for Mia and Owen. Magnolia Academy private pristine with iron gates and white walls. Tuition over $18,000 a year. Lena had pleaded, "Just for the first few years, Mom. After that, we'll manage." The first few years had turned into 12. Martha added the numbers, her hand trembling slightly, more than $216,000 just for education. Next came the medical folder, $6,000 a year. It covered the time Brandon lost his job, Lena's depression, and dozens of doctor and dentist bills, all perfectly organized in white envelopes labeled health. Martha had once believed that caring for their health was a mother's duty. Now she saw those papers as evidence of gratitude that had long since died. The last drawer held the purple file marked extras. Vacations, a new kitchen cruise tickets to Europe photos posted online with captions like, "Proud of my husband's success." Martha stared at one receipt, $12,000 for a luxury trip, and felt the cold settle deep in her chest. She began adding everything together. House payments, $316,800. Car, $129,000. Tuition, $216,000. Medical, $72,000. Travel, $55,000. Total, $833,800. The pen stopped. Martha leaned back in her leather chair, her chest hollow. Nearly $1 million in exchange for scorn. She remembered the early years when Lena still called every week, sent cookies, and said thank you over and over. But gratitude had faded, replaced by the familiar line, "Mom, the transfer hasn't come yet." Martha reached for a photo on the desk, the three of them in front of their old house. Lena looked young, then her eyes bright. Brandon had bowed his head politely, calling her ma'am. Now arrogance had replaced respect. and she, the woman who once stood on her feet for 16 hours in the hospital ward, was being called useless. She stacked the folders neatly, shutting each drawer with a steady thud. A new plan was forming in her mind. Stop all transfers. No bailouts, no negotiations. Let them live on what they truly earned. Martha took out a brown leather notebook and wrote, "Support termination plan begins Monday." Below that, she listed 10 recurring payments, underlining each one. Every stroke of her pen felt like cutting a thread that had bound her for too long. When she finished, she set the pen down and drew in a long breath. Outside, the sea breeze carried the scent of salt and pine. Inside the small room, the golden light shone on her thin but steady hands. For the first time in years, she felt lighter. Martha smiled faintly and whispered as if speaking to Anthony, "I kept my promise. Now it's time for them to live on their own." She turned off the lamp. The light vanished, leaving a gentle, peaceful darkness. The smell of paper and wood mingled with the whisper of the sea wind, like the first breath of freedom. The woman once called useless had taken back control of her life. Tomorrow, everything would begin to change. The next morning, Charleston lay under a thin veil of mist, soft and silvery like a piece of gauze. Martha rose at 6, brewed a cup of black coffee, and opened the leather-bound notebook on her desk. On the first page, written in her neat handwriting, were the words she had inscribed the night before: "Support termination plan begins today." The steam from the coffee rose bitter and rich, and the scent made her feel unusually awake. For 12 years, she had begun every morning by checking her accounts to ensure her daughter's bills were paid on time. But today, she would do the opposite. She sat down by the landline phone, arranging the stack of papers with account details beside her. The first call was to First Coastal Bank. The young woman's polite voice came through the receiver. "Good morning. How may I help you?" Martha answered, calm and firm. "I'd like to cancel all automatic transfers from my account to the Hayes household." The representative asked for her security code, and Martha spelled it out clearly, each number steady. When she heard the sound of the keyboard clicking, she smiled faintly, the sound of freedom. "All set, Mrs. Collins," the woman confirmed. "Those transfers have been canceled effective immediately." "Thank you," Martha replied softly. A new page of her life had just turned. Next, she called Charleston Mutual Insurance. "Yes, I'd like to stop the automatic renewal of the homeowner's policy for the property under Lena Hayes' name." "I'm sorry, ma'am. Did you say you want to cancel it entirely?" "Yes. I'm no longer responsible for that account." The agent hesitated, then confirmed the request. When the call ended, Martha marked a check next to item number 2 in her notebook, her hand steady as though she were finishing an old nursing shift. The third call was to Coastal Motors, where Brandon leased his black SUV. "I'm a co-signer on the contract," she said, "and I'd like to have my name removed from the guarantee." The clerk asked for documentation. "No problem," Martha said, with the calm confidence of someone long accustomed to paperwork and procedure. She continued calling Palmetto Utilities, the accounting office at Magnolia Academy, the tuition department, and the healthcare provider. Each call lasted only 10 minutes, but for Martha, each was a small act of liberation. Every time she heard the words, "process complete" on the other end, her chest felt lighter. By 11, more than half the list was done. She poured herself another cup of coffee and leaned back, gazing out the window. The sun had risen light, filtering through the bougainvillea on her porch, pink blossoms glowing like the start of something new. At exactly 12:15, her cell phone rang. The screen lit up with Lena's name. Martha answered. "Mom, something's wrong with the bank account." Lena said, her voice tense. "They said the mortgage payment didn't go through." Martha took a slow breath. "That's because I stopped all transfers." There was silence for several seconds before Lena burst out, "You're joking, right?" "Why didn't you warn me I did?" Martha said evenly. "Last night. at dinner. The line went quiet, then came a sharp exhale. "You can't do this, Mom. I have 2 kids and we have bills to pay." Martha's tone remained gentle but unyielding. "Then you'll have to pay them. I've helped long enough." When the call ended, she circled number 6 in her notebook and wrote one word beside it: completed. That afternoon, she made 8 more calls her health insurance provider, the internet company home cleaning service, and the credit card office. Each time the agent asked, "Are you sure?" Martha answered, "Absolutely." By 3:30, the final box was checked. Just as she set down the phone, it rang again. Lena's voice was shaky. "Mom, the bank just messaged me. The account's short. I thought the automatic payments were still active." "Not anymore," Martha said quietly. "From today on, you'll live on your own income." Her daughter's voice cracked. "At least give us some time to adjust." Martha sighed softly. 12 years isn't enough, Lena." The other end went silent, then the call disconnected. The little house fell still. Martha placed the phone on the table, leaning back in her chair to the distant sound of waves against the shore. For 12 years, she had been her daughter's shield against every storm. Now that shield was lowered. Around 4 o'clock, she closed the notebook, locked the filing cabinet, and stepped out onto the porch. The late afternoon sunlight washed over her tired but serene face. Across the street, a few children were running and laughing, their joy crisp and pure. Watching them, Martha smiled faintly. The guilt that had shadowed her heart began to dissolve, replaced by peace. Her phone buzzed again, a text from Lena. "I can't believe you actually did this." Martha didn't reply. She set the phone down, took a sip of cold coffee, and gazed toward the sea. As the sun dipped below the horizon, she wrote one last line in her notebook: "Freedom begins today." Closing it gently, she stood and tidied her desk, her heart lighter than it had been in years, as though she had finally set down the weight of a lifetime. 2 days later, the early summer breeze swept through the Charleston suburbs, carrying the scent of salt and humidity. In a spotless tiled kitchen, Lena stood frozen, staring at her phone screen. The bank notification blinked. Mortgage payment failed. Late fee $85. Brandon, dressed neatly in a pressed white shirt, was pouring coffee. "Must be a technical error," he said, but when he checked their account, his face turned to stone. "Your card's been declined. Mine too." "What the hell is going on?" Within hours, more alerts flooded in the children's tuition. Unpaid their home insurance, canceled a notice from the car dealership warning of repossession. Brandon slammed his hand on the counter. She actually did it. Lena closed her eyes. Her mother's voice from that dinner echoed in her mind. "I won't pay for your luxurious life anymore." Back then, she thought it was anger talking. Now it was a verdict. That evening, the house was bright, but felt cold. Brandon sat at the dining table, his wine glass trembling. "She wants to punish us," Lena whispered. "She's only doing what she said she would." "Do you realize we're about to lose the house?" he shouted. "She wants to see us crawl." A spoon clattered against the table. Their daughter, Mia, 11, looked up frightened. "Dad, why are you yelling?" Owen gripped his sister's hand. Brandon forced a smile. "It's nothing, just a payment issue." But Lena knew this time they had no one to lean on. 3 days later, a letter from the bank was taped to their door, a delinquency notice warning that if payment wasn't made within 30 days, foreclosure would begin. Lena's hands shook as she read it, cold sweat tracing her spine. Brandon stared at the paper, pale. "Your mother wants war fine." He called Martha, but she didn't answer. That afternoon, a crew from the insurance company arrived to remove the property sign. Neighbors gathered curiously. "Everything all right?" Lena, Mrs. Alvarez asked. "Just a small error." Lena forced a smile, then turned away as tears welled up. That night, Brandon sat in his office, half a bottle of whiskey gone. "You know this is all your fault," he muttered. "If you could just talk to your mother, she wouldn't have cut us off like this." Lena looked at him, exhausted. "You think I didn't try? She's made up her mind. And maybe she's right." Brandon laughed dryly. "Right. You're defending her now." "Did you forget who takes care of you and these kids?" Lena's voice trembled. "Without my mother, could you pay this mortgage for even 1 month?" The glass shattered against the wall, red wine splattering like blood. "I don't need anyone's charity," he roared. Lena stared at the shards on the floor, feeling as though she were looking at the pieces of her own life. That night, she couldn't sleep. The hallway light glowed faintly over a pile of scattered bills. She thought of every gift her mother had given, every hospital bill she'd paid, every night she'd held the babies so Lena could rest. Her mother had never asked for anything except gratitude. The next morning, when she drove the children to school, a staff member stopped her at the gate. "I'm sorry, ma'am, tuition hasn't been paid. The children will have to stay home until the balance is cleared." Mia's eyes filled with tears as she looked at her mother. Lena could only bow her head. By noon, the power company sent a message: electricity temporarily disconnected after 3 failed payments. Brandon hurled his phone onto the table. "No, she can't be this cruel." But the only response was a recorded message: "The number you've dialed is unavailable." Later, Lena sat alone in the dim kitchen, surrounded by piles of paperwork. The house that had once been her pride now felt hollow. She looked around: the polished floor, the refrigerator, the leather chairs, all just shells. She realized their life had been built on her mother's money, not their own effort. And when that stream stopped, everything collapsed like a castle of sand. As night fell, the soft sound of rain drifted through the porch. Lena opened a small notebook and wrote the first line: "Learn to live on my own." She didn't know how she would do it, but somewhere inside her, a fragile spark flickered. Perhaps this was the real beginning, a painful rebirth into a life where she would finally stand on her own 2 feet. A week later, the neighborhood in Charleston buzzed with gossip about the Hayes family. Rumors spread faster than the ocean wind. People said that Martha Collins, the famously kind, soft-spoken mother, had cut off all financial support to her daughter and grandchildren, leaving their family in crisis. At the She Crab Tavern, where Brandon was a regular, the whispers turned into accusations. "Did you hear?" one woman murmured. "They say Mrs. Collins abandoned her daughter over a small disagreement." Sitting in the corner, Brandon heard everything. He lifted his head, forcing a crooked smile. "Abandoned us." She didn't just abandon us, she took back the dignity she claimed to give. A man nearby asked, "Didn't she help you once?" Brandon replied quickly, "A few times, nothing major. But she likes to think she's a savior. Cutting us off is her way of showing power." He spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. Within hours, the story spread beyond the cafe, seeping into every corner of the neighborhood. That afternoon, Helen, Martha's closest friend, called. "Martha, I just heard something at She Crab. Brandon's telling people you abandoned him and destroyed his family." Martha was trimming roses in her garden. Her scissors paused midair. "He really said that, yes, and people are starting to talk." Martha sighed. "Then I'll let the truth speak for itself." The next morning at the grocery store, 2 neighbors whispered near the checkout, "Have you noticed their power's been out for 3 days? I heard it's because her mother cut off the money." Their words reached Lena as she stood in line with a small basket, instant noodles, eggs, and the cheapest milk she could find. Her cheeks flushed with shame as the cashier gave her a sympathetic look. At home, she told Brandon, "People are talking. They think Mom's cruel." Brandon narrowed his eyes. "Good. The more they take our side, the better. I'm not letting her win." He opened his laptop and began typing furiously. The post appeared on social media. No one knows the pain of being betrayed by your own mother, a woman who once promised to protect her children but left us with nothing. Within hours, comments of sympathy poured in. Old friends sent supportive messages, but by midnight the post reached Helen and then Martha. Early the next morning, Helen texted, "He's spreading lies everywhere. Should I tell people the truth?" Martha replied simply, "No need. Let them ask. I'll answer when the time comes." That afternoon, she went to the seafood market. As she chose shrimp, a middle-aged woman approached her tone, half curious, half accusatory. "I heard you cut off your daughter's finances while she's struggling." "Why would you do that?" Martha smiled gently. "Has anyone told you about the $833,000? The woman blinked. "How much 12 years of support?" Martha said softly, meeting her gaze. "Mortgage cars, tuition, medical bills, vacations. Do you think that's not enough?" By evening, the rumor had shifted. One person told another, and within hours, everyone knew Mrs. Collins had spent nearly $1 million on her daughter's family. The story of the cruel mother quickly became the mother who'd been used. That night, Helen called again. "Everyone's on your side now. They're saying Brandon lived off your money for 12 years and still had the nerve to complain." Martha sat in her living room, the warm lamplight softening her tired but dignified face. "Helen, he doesn't understand that unspoken gratitude is still gratitude, but silence can't erase it." Meanwhile, at the Hayes house, Brandon angrily scrolled through comments that now turned against him. "They're calling me a leech," he shouted, slamming his fist on the table. Lena said nothing. "Who did you talk to?" he barked. "No one." She replied quietly, but maybe Mom started telling the truth. Later that night, when Lena went outside to take out the trash, Mrs. Alvarez, their neighbor, approached hesitantly. "Lena, I can hardly believe it, but people say your mother spent over $800,000 helping you. Is that true?" Lena froze. The question cut into her pride like a knife. I don't know the exact number," she murmured. "If it's true," Mrs. Alvarez said kindly, "then you should know you have an extraordinary mother." Back inside, Lena collapsed into a chair, tears streaming down her face. Brandon stood on the porch, smoking silent. In the dim yellow light, she could see fear flicker in his eyes, not anger this time, but the dread of being exposed. The next morning, Helen visited Martha carrying a basket of muffins and a gentle smile. "You don't need to say another word," she said. "Everyone knows now. They're looking at Brandon differently." Martha nodded. "It's not to humiliate him, Helen. It's to remind him of what gratitude is worth." When Helen left, Martha stood by the window gazing at her rose garden. The wind brushed past, making the petals tremble softly. She knew the storm of gossip had finally shifted direction, and for the first time in years, the truth no longer felt like a burden. It was the light that allowed others to finally see clearly. 3 days later, the shiny black SUV that had once been Brandon's pride was hauled away from the driveway as neighbors watched. The sharp scrape of metal on concrete echoed through the morning air. Owen pressed his face against the window, eyes wide. "Dad, why are they taking our car?" he asked. Brandon turned away, his jaw, tight hands clenched white. Lena closed the curtain quietly, tears slipping down her cheeks. That afternoon, she walked to River Market with her resume folded neatly in her hand. The manager, a middle-aged man with a tired but kind face, looked her over. "Do you have experience in retail? I used to be an accountant," she said softly. "But I've been home for 12 years raising my children." He nodded. "We need someone for the evening shift. $12.50 an hour. You can start next week." Lena forced a small smile. "I'll take it." On her first day, she wore a pale blue uniform and stood behind Register 8 scanning items under the hum of fluorescent lights. Some customers recognized her. One woman whispered, "Isn't that Lena Hayes?" The deputy director's wife, Lena, only smiled politely, her hands trembling. When her shift ended, rain poured down. She ran home through puddles, shoes, soaked heart heavy. That night, Brandon sat in the living room with a beer. "So this is it," he said bitterly. "You really want everyone to see you working as a cashier." Lena's voice was calm but sharp. "At least someone here is doing something real," he scoffed. "Don't act righteous. I'm still trying to fix this." "Fix it with anger," she shot back, her voice breaking. Upstairs, Mia whispered Mom's crying again. Owen hugged her. "I want to live with Grandma," he said softly. The words cut through the house like a blade. 2 weeks later, the power went out again. Brandon sat in the dark, the faint light from his phone reflecting his hollow eyes. He called Martha, but it went to voicemail. "Mom," he said hoarsely, "we don't need money, just time." The message sent, but no answer came. Days later, their old rented Honda broke down. Brandon pushed it to the side of the road, sweat dripping down his face. In the car mirror, he saw himself, a man who had once called himself a provider, now beaten by life. Meanwhile, Lena kept working night shifts at the supermarket. Her hands grew rough from hours of scanning groceries. One evening, she saw Helen, her mother's friend, in line. Helen smiled kindly. "How are you holding up?" Lena hesitated, then said, "I'm learning. Turns out work isn't as humiliating as I thought." Helen nodded. "Martha will be glad to hear that." That night, when Lena came home, Brandon was sitting on the porch, head bowed. "You should stop drinking," she said softly. "The kids are scared." He looked up, his eyes dull. "There's nothing left to lose. The company's cutting staff. I'll probably be next." She sat beside him. "Maybe losing everything is the only way we finally see clearly." He didn't answer. The next morning, Lena woke at dawn. The house was quiet except for the ticking clock. She cleaned in silence, wiped the dust off a framed photo of Martha holding her grandchildren, her face gentle, her eyes strong. That afternoon, Brandon went to an interview but came home rejected. "No one wants a 40-year-old man with no new skills," he muttered. Lena placed a bowl of soup before him. "Then learn something new. I'm learning too." For once, he didn't argue. That evening, Mia ran up to her mother. "Grandma called," she said. Lena froze. "What did she say?" "She just asked if we're okay and said she loves us." Lena sank to the floor, tears spilling freely. Those simple words felt like a hand resting on her shoulder in the dark. On Sunday, her day off, Lena took the kids for a walk by the river. The air was clear, the sunlight soft. Owen picked up a pebble and tossed it into the water, watching the ripples spread. "Mom, are we bad because we're poor?" he asked quietly. Lena squeezed his hand. "No, sweetheart. Being poor isn't bad. Giving up is." When they returned home, Brandon was sitting at the table, surrounded by overdue bills. "I called the lawyer," he said quietly. "If we miss 3 more payments, the bank will take the house." Lena nodded calmer now. "Maybe losing the house isn't the worst thing as long as we still have each other." Brandon looked at her for a long moment, something in his expression softening guilt or maybe realization. That night, in the dim light of a candle, Lena opened her small notebook and wrote, "From today, I will live like my mother, strong, unafraid, and never asking for pity." Outside, the wind swept in from the river, cool and clean. Inside, the house was silent, but for the first time in years, it was not the silence of resentment. It was the silence of awakening a family, finally facing themselves, stripped of pride, learning painfully and slowly what it truly meant to stand on their own. It was Friday afternoon when Martha was watering her rose garden and heard a car stop outside the gate. Brandon's gray Honda appeared covered in dust. He stepped out, his shirt, wrinkled face, tired, stripped of the arrogance he once carried. "Can I talk to you for a few minutes?" he asked, quietly. Martha nodded. "Come inside." The living room smelled faintly of cinnamon tea. Brandon sat down, clasping his hands together. "I didn't come to argue," he began. "I just want to speak honestly." Martha said nothing, waiting. He took a deep breath. "You won." "I thought I could handle things on my own, but clearly I can't. Everything's slipping away." "So why are you here?" Martha asked calmly. "I'm not asking for money," he said, his voice low. "I just want to understand why, after all these years, you cut us off so suddenly." Martha studied him for a long moment. "Do you know why people drown?" she asked softly. "It's not because they can't swim, but because they panic. You've been living like that, thrashing in the water, but still clinging to the life preserver with my name on it." Brandon dropped his gaze. Martha poured tea and slid a cup toward him. "I don't want you to hate me," she said gently. "I want you to stand on your own. Freedom isn't something someone gives you, it's something you choose." He gripped the teacup tightly, his voice hoarse. "I saw Lena working at the supermarket checkout, saw my children's fear, and realized I'm nothing." Martha nodded slightly. "Then stop being the victim. Stand up and start again." He looked up, eyes red. "Do you really think I still have a chance?" "There's always a chance," she said, "if you can find humility." Brandon pressed his lips together and nodded. "Thank you for still opening your door to me." "This door was never locked," Martha replied softly. "You just needed to walk in with honesty." When he left, she watched him go. His steps were heavy but steady. For the first time in 12 years, he bowed his head, not in defeat, but in understanding. The next morning, Lena arrived. She wore her supermarket uniform, hair tied hastily, dark circles under her eyes. Martha was brewing coffee. "Would you like something to drink?" she asked. "Just water," Lena murmured, sitting down. Her voice trembled. "I didn't come to argue. I just don't know where to start." "Start with the truth," Martha said. Lena lowered her head. "I'm afraid the truth will disappoint you." "Disappointed because you're being honest," Martha smiled faintly. Lena drew a shaky breath. "You were right. We depended on you too long. I forgot what it felt like to earn money. Now every dollar I make fills me with both pride and shame." Martha said nothing, only listened. "Yesterday, Mia asked if we were poor." Lena continued. "I remembered what you used to say. As long as you try, no one has the right to call you useless." I told her the same thing. Martha looked at her daughter with gentle firmness. "Then you've learned something. Money can't teach self-respect." Tears welled in Lena's eyes. "I used to think you were cruel, but now I see you only wanted me to wake up." Martha stood and retrieved a small envelope from a drawer. "These are the statements from the 12 years I supported you. You should know the truth." Lena opened it and froze at the rows of numbers. "Oh my God, Mom, more than 800,000. Martha nodded. "Don't feel ashamed of the number?" "Feel ashamed that I had to pay it for you." Lena folded the envelope, her hands trembling. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "not for the money, but for hurting you." "Trust can be rebuilt," Martha said, "but only through action." Lena reached for her mother's hand. "I'll teach my children gratitude just like you tried to teach me." "Don't teach with words," Martha replied. "Teach with example. Let them see you work, save, and say thank you." Lena nodded, eyes wet. "Mom, thank you for never giving up on me." Martha smiled softly. "I never give up on anyone. I just stop letting them depend on me." When Lena left, the morning sun poured into the rose garden. The petals shimmered, still damp with dew. Standing at the door, Martha watched her daughter walk away, a strange peace filling her chest. She knew these 2 visits had opened the first door, the door to awakening. Turning back inside, she stopped before the framed photo of herself and Anthony. The sunlight fell on his smiling face. "You see," she whispered, "I don't need to win against anyone. I just need them to learn how to stand." A sea breeze drifted through the window, carrying the scent of salt and cinnamon. Martha smiled. For the first time in years, she felt truly at rest, not because she had given up, but because she had finally allowed others to begin their own lives. 3 days later, Martha received a call from Lena. Her daughter's voice trembled. "Mom, we need to talk. Can we come by today?" Martha agreed and set the time for the afternoon. Before hanging up, she simply said, "Bring Brandon with you." At 4:30, the gray Honda pulled up in front of the house. Brandon stepped out, his shirt faded and wrinkled, holding a stack of papers in his hand. Lena followed, her eyes red from crying. When Martha opened the door, they stood there silently for a moment like students waiting to be called on. "Come in," she said calmly. In the living room, the late afternoon sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting a soft glow over the family photos on the wall. Brandon spoke first. "We didn't come to ask for money," he said. "We just want to know if there's any way to fix this." Martha sat across from them, her hands clasped together. "There is," she said slowly, "but there will be conditions." The air tightened. Her tone was firm and deliberate. "I will continue to support Jake and Sophie. Their school fees, clothes, medical care, and activities, I'll pay those directly to the institutions. But for the two of you, house car insurance, personal expenses, everything stops from today." Lena lowered her head. Brandon's hands clenched into fists. "And one more thing," Martha continued. "I want both of you to publicly acknowledge how much I've paid over the last 12 years. I want a sincere apology, not because I need it, but because you need to learn accountability." Brandon froze. "Publicly. You want us to humiliate ourselves." Martha looked him straight in the eye. "No, I want you to reclaim your dignity. The truth doesn't humiliate anyone, it only strips away the lies." Lena squeezed her husband's hand, her voice barely a whisper. Brandon listened to her. He snapped, "What else do you want?" Martha took a quiet breath. "I want you both to come here for family dinner once a month. We won't talk about money, just to remind you who you are. And I want you to promise that from now on, you'll live within what you actually earn." Brandon shot to his feet. "So now you're controlling our lives." Martha didn't move. Her voice stayed steady. "I'm not controlling anyone. I'm setting boundaries. If you can't respect them, then losing my help is fair." The silence was heavy. Lena looked around the room, the house of her childhood filled with memories of laughter and the smell of her mother's Sunday apple pie. Her voice broke. "Mom, if I agree, Brandon might not—" "Each of you chooses for yourselves," Martha interrupted. "I won't force anyone." The ticking of the clock filled the space. Finally, Brandon spoke quietly, his voice strained. "What about the kids? They've done nothing wrong," Martha replied without hesitation. "Exactly. That's why I won't let them suffer." She took out a typed document from the drawer. "This is the new agreement. I'll open 2 separate accounts for Jake and Sophie, deposit money regularly for education and health only. You're not allowed to withdraw a cent for anything else." Brandon stared at the paper, his lips pressed thin. "And if we don't sign, then there's nothing." Martha said calmly, "Everything ends here." Lena looked at her mother, her voice barely audible. "How long do we have to decide? 24 hours, Martha answered. "After that, I'll assume you've declined." Brandon took a step forward, ready to argue, but stopped when he met her gaze. It was no longer the gaze of a soft-hearted mother, but of a woman who had lived long enough to understand the strength of limits. He swallowed hard. "I need time," he muttered. "Time isn't scarce. Martha said softly, but opportunity is. Lena held the document tightly, her hands trembling. Mom, if we agree, will you forgive us? Martha smiled faintly. Forgiveness belongs to the heart, not to contracts. I will always love you, but differently not, with money, with truth. Brandon lowered his head. He said nothing as they walked toward the door. Before leaving, Lena turned back, her eyes glistening. Thank you, Mom, for still thinking of Jake and Sophie. Martha replied quietly. I've never stopped thinking of anyone. I just stopped saving those who don't want to be saved. The door closed behind them. The sound of the Honda engine faded into the distance. Martha stood still, watching through the window as the last light of day painted golden streaks across her face. On the table lay a duplicate of the agreement. She placed her hand on it gently, feeling the smooth paper beneath her palm. The house was silent except for the faint rustle of wind moving through the roses outside. Martha sat down and opened her small notebook, writing a single line. If they learn honesty, it will be the greatest gift I ever gave. She closed it and looked out at the garden bathed in the warm glow of sunset. Inside her heart there was no anger left, only quiet faith that sometimes love isn't about holding on, but about having the courage to let go. That night, the Hayes kitchen was dimly lit by a single hanging lamp. On the table, Martha's agreement lay between them like a deep crack that split the room in two. Brandon sat hunched over a beer bottle, open but untouched. Lena stood by the stove, her eyes sunken, her voice hoarse. Mom gave us 24 hours. If we don't answer, everything ends. Brandon gave a hollow laugh. Ends. So what? At least I'll still have my pride. Lena spun around, her tone sharp. Pride doesn't pay tuition. It doesn't keep this house standing. He snapped. So you want me to kneel and apologize in front of the whole town? That's what she wants, isn't it? Lena sat down exhausted. She's not trying to humiliate you. She wants us to be honest. Aren't you ashamed that for 12 years this house ran on her money? Brandon didn't answer. His fist slammed against the table, making the glass rattle. I worked, didn't I? I'm not some parasite. You worked. Lena said, her voice trembling. But you lived beyond your means. You needed to look successful while Mom just wanted us to live within reality. The silence that followed was long and suffocating. Upstairs, the wind howled against the window, making the curtains flutter. Mia and Owen lay in their beds, listening. Mom, are we going to lose the house? Owen whispered. Be quiet, Mia said softly. Mom's sad. Downstairs, Lena opened her notebook and grabbed a pen. Look, she said, scribbling. Your income is $4,200 after tax. I make about $1,200 a month. That's $5,400 total. The mortgage is $2,285. That leaves $3,115. Subtract utilities, insurance, gas, less than $1,600 left. The kids need school food and medicine. What do you suggest? Brandon took the paper, staring at the numbers. Each line cut into his pride like a blade. Then we'll cut expenses, he muttered. Cut what meals? The kids' medicine. Lena gave a tired smile. No, Brandon, we need to cut the illusion. He stood and paced his tone low. I can't stand people pitying me. Mom doesn't pity you, Lena said quietly. She's saving you even if you can't see it. Brandon froze. Saving me by making me bow in public. Saving you by teaching you to bow to the truth, Lena replied. The clock struck 9:30. The room smelled of smoke and damp air. Brandon walked to the window and looked out at the quiet street, the street lamp casting a dull yellow glow across the glass. If I sign, everyone will know I've lived off my mother-in-law. I'll have no dignity left. You lost your dignity long ago, Lena said softly, her words slicing through the silence. Not when Mom cut us off, but when you stopped saying thank you. Brandon turned anger flickering in his eyes, then fading. He collapsed into the chair, head in his hands. I don't know how to fix this. Everything's a mess. Lena looked at him, seeing not a husband to fight with, but a man stripped bare, small and human. Start with the truth. Tell Mom you're sorry. Admit you were wrong. That's enough. He looked up, his voice breaking. If I do that, will she forgive me? No one knows, Lena said. But if you don't, you'll never forgive yourself. Upstairs, a door creaked open. Mia stood on the stairs, clutching her teddy bear. Please stop fighting. I'm scared. Brandon looked at her, his eyes wet. Go back to bed, sweetheart. We're just talking. When she disappeared into her room, he clenched his fist. I don't want my kids to be afraid of me. Lena placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Then stop fighting your mother. Fight your ego instead. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. Brandon sat motionless, listening to the steady patter of rain on the roof. Each drop felt like a clock tick, marking the passing of denial. He looked at Lena. If I agree, she'll make us write a public apology. Yes, she said, and you'll do it. He glanced down at the document, Martha's handwriting firm and precise. He picked up the pen, turning it between his fingers. I hate this feeling, he murmured, but I hate seeing my kids scared even more. He pressed the pen to paper and signed. The ink bled slightly like a wound sealing over. Lena watched tears spilling down her cheeks. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me, Brandon said softly. I'm not doing this for your mother. I'm doing it for our children. The rain kept falling, wind sweeping through the open window with a chill. On the table, the signed paper lay still, a testament not to defeat, but to the beginning of growth. Lena folded the copy and slipped it into her coat pocket. Tomorrow we'll bring it to Mom. Brandon nodded quietly. Tomorrow. When the light went out, the house fell into darkness, filled only with the sound of rain and the heavy breaths of two people learning at last how to grow up. The next morning, the Charleston air was cool and clear. Martha was preparing breakfast when she heard the sound of a car stopping at the gate. The gray Honda, its paint chipped, and exhaust faintly smoking, came to a halt. Lena stepped out first, holding a folder in her hand. Brandon followed his eyes, sunk in his posture, weary. Between them stood Mia and Owen, dressed in their old but clean school uniforms. The sight made Martha freeze for a moment, her hands still midair. She opened the door. Lena spoke first, her voice trembling. Mom, we came to tell you. We accept your conditions. Martha nodded slightly and stepped aside. Come in. We need to talk properly. In the living room, they all sat around the wooden table. Brandon took a sheet of paper from his pocket and placed it on the table. I signed it, he said, not because I was forced to, but because I finally understand I was wrong. He took a deep breath. I used to think you just wanted control, but now I know you wanted respect. Martha looked at him, her eyes no longer cold but filled with compassion. You've shown respect for yourself by saying that, she replied softly. Lena opened the folder, her voice breaking. We're sorry. For 12 years, you paid for everything, this house, the car, the school, the meals. I never stopped to think about the weight you carried. Martha nodded. Apologies matter, but actions speak louder. What do you plan to do next? Brandon answered, his tone honest. I'll find another job even if I have to start from scratch. I don't want to live another day on someone else's money. Lena squeezed his hand. I'll take extra shifts, save what we can, and teach our children to be grateful. Martha stood, picking up the phone on the side table. I'll call the bank, she said. I'll settle the remaining balance to stop the foreclosure. But this will be the last time. Lena's voice caught. You'll really help us. Only so you'll still have a roof to stand under, Martha replied. No one can learn a lesson while sleeping on the street. She spoke to the bank clerk in a calm, steady tone. Yes, I confirm the transfer, $9,125, today. When she hung up, she turned back to them. From now on, whether you succeed or fail will depend on you. Mia tugged on Martha's sleeve. Grandma, does that mean we won't lose our house? Martha bent down, smoothing the child's hair. No, sweetheart, you won't. But from now on, your parents will take care of everything. Brandon looked at the children, then at Martha. Do you still want us to apologize publicly? Yes, she said simply. I want the truth put back where it belongs, not to humiliate anyone, but to restore trust. Lena nodded and took out 2 sheets of paper. I've already written thank you letters for the community paper and a public apology post for social media. I'll send them today. Martha smiled faintly. Good. Once the truth is spoken, no one can use it against you anymore. The tension in the room eased. Light streamed through the window, illuminating their faces. Martha carefully placed the signed agreement in her file cabinet. Every month I'll send money directly to Jake and Sophie's schools and doctors. The rest is up to you. No renegotiations, no exceptions. Brandon nodded. I understand, and thank you for not abandoning us. Martha's tone was soft but firm. I didn't abandon you. I only abandoned your dependents. Lena sat silently, tears streaming down her cheeks. Mom, I used to think you did all this to get revenge, but now I see you just wanted to teach us how to live. Martha smiled a small but warm smile. A parent doesn't want to defeat their children. They just want them to know how to stand after they fall. She stood, her gaze tender. Now go home. Prepare for tomorrow. Start again, simple but true. As they reached the door, Brandon turned back. Can you forgive me? He asked quietly. Martha looked at him, her voice soft as a breeze. When you learned to bow your head, I had already forgiven you. Lena stepped forward and embraced her mother. Thank you, Mom. Martha placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. Don't thank me. Just make your life something worth believing in. They left in the pale noon sunlight. Martha stood at the doorway watching as the gray Honda rolled slowly out of the gate. She knew that from this day forward they would no longer be children trapped in grown bodies, but 2 people learning how to live honestly again. When the car disappeared behind the trees, Martha returned to the table and sat down. The house was still filled only with the chirping of birds outside. She opened her notebook and wrote a single line. Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's how the heart stays soft instead of turning to stone. Martha closed the notebook and exhaled. Inside her chest, something lightened, as if an old wound had finally been wrapped in the quiet strength of compassion. 4 months after the morning they signed the agreement, autumn arrived in Charleston. The maple leaves had turned orange and red, and the river breeze carried a cool bite. In her small house by the water, Martha set the table once more. Every month she kept the same tradition, family dinner. It wasn't fancy, but it was her way of reminding everyone that love was always the main course. The gray Honda pulled up at exactly 3 o'clock. Mia and Owen ran ahead, faces glowing. Grandma, I have good news, Mia shouted. I got an A in math. Owen raised a bronze medal proudly. I scored a goal in the championship. Martha opened her arms, embracing them both. That's wonderful. I'm so proud of you. Lena followed behind, dressed in a neat but old office jacket. Mom, I got promoted to assistant manager. I'm making $17.25 an hour now. Brandon came in next, his smile modest. My company is considering me for a team leader position. No one helped me. I earned it myself. Martha nodded, her eyes shining. Now you understand why I wanted you to stand on your own. Dinner was simple grilled fish potatoes, salad, and apple pie. No wine, just tea and milk for the children. In the soft glow of evening, the room filled with a warmth Martha hadn't felt in years. Owen told stories about his soccer game, and Mia talked excitedly about school. Lena said softly, Mom, I'm grateful that you've been covering the kids' school and medical bills. Without you, I don't know where I'd have started." Martha smiled. "I didn't do it for you. I just helped where it was needed. You're the one who learned the value of hard work." Brandon set his fork down, his voice sincere. "You were right. Working hard isn't shameful. Living off someone else is. I used to be afraid people would see me fail. Now I only fear that my kids might see me pretending." Martha looked at him, her gaze gentle but deep. "You're teaching them by your example. That's what a father should do." After dinner, Lena handed Martha a small stack of papers. "Mom, this is our monthly budget. We paid all the utilities and still saved $500. Martha glanced through the pages and smiled. "Good. That's a responsible budget. That's what adulthood looks like." She opened a drawer and took out 2 envelopes for the children. "Here are your education account statements. I've opened one for each of you." Mia hugged her while Owen asked, "Can I put my savings in too?" Martha chuckled. "Of course. I'll help you manage it." Later, the family sat out on the porch. The wind was cool and steady, carrying the scent of fallen leaves. Brandon said Lena and I just finished our 40 hours of community service after our public apology. We volunteered at the meal center for the homeless. I met people who suffer not because they're lazy, but because no one helped them the right way. Martha nodded. Sometimes humility begins when we see the pain of others. Lena looked out toward the river, her voice trembling. "I've learned that gratitude isn't just saying thank you, it's living so no one else has to carry your weight." Martha smiled gently. "That's right. Once you understand that I've already won." Mia tilted her head. "Mom, if Owen and I do something wrong, do we have to apologize in public too?" Brandon laughed. "Yes. Saying sorry doesn't make you small. It makes you big enough to fix your mistakes." At that moment, Martha felt a wave of peace wash over her. For years, she hadn't wanted her money back. She only wanted to see real change. And now she was seeing it unfold before her eyes. When night fell, Lena cleared the table and Brandon took out the trash. Martha sat by the window holding a cup of hot tea, watching her grandchildren play outside. Their laughter echoed through the yard, washing away the memories of exhaustion and anger. Lena returned and asked quietly, "Mom, are you still angry?" Martha replied softly, "No, anger only makes the heart heavy. I just hope you water your gratitude every day the way I water my garden." Brandon came back inside, speaking slowly. "Thank you, Mom. Not for helping us, but for letting us fall. Without that fall, we'd never have known where we were weak." Martha set her teacup down. "That's what love is for, to make people stronger, not dependent." Before leaving, Owen threw his arms around her. "Grandma, I'll work hard one day and buy you a present." Martha laughed. "You just keep that promise and that'll be enough." When the door closed, the house grew quiet again, filled only with the scent of cinnamon and the sound of leaves brushing the path. Martha opened her familiar notebook and wrote, "When my children are grateful, they are free. And when they are free, I am at peace." She closed the notebook and turned off the light. Outside, the autumn wind drifted softly across the porch, carrying with it the gentle calm that only comes after 12 years of hard-earned lessons. On a clear October afternoon, the Charleston sky gleamed like glass. Sunlight filtered through the trees, spreading a warm golden glow across the roof of Martha's small home. She set the table on the porch, smoothing a white cloth and placing a vase of fresh roses in the center. Today marked the 4th family dinner since her daughter's family signed the agreement, but this time the air felt different. Lighter, peaceful, and full of laughter. Right on time, the gray Honda pulled up. Lena stepped out first, wearing a blue blouse and walking with newfound confidence. Brandon followed, holding a paper bag and smiling sincerely. Mia and Owen ran ahead, their laughter scattering across the yard like sunshine. "Grandma, I got a science scholarship," Mia shouted proudly, waving her certificate. Owen lifted a team photo, eyes bright. My team won the championship. Grandma Martha hugged them both, her heart swelling. That's wonderful, my loves. Now go tell your mom and dad. The family gathered around the porch table. Dinner was simple grilled fish bread and salad, but laughter filled the warm air. Brandon poured tea and said, "You know, I really earned that promotion this time. No luck, just work." Martha smiled gently. The greatest miracle is the one that happens when you change yourself. Lena's smile glowed in the soft light. I've started saving for the kids' college fund. Every month I transfer the money myself, no reminders. Martha's eyes softened. That's the best news I could hear. After dinner, they moved to the wooden chairs on the porch. The late-season cicadas buzzed faintly in the background, blending with the whisper of the river breeze. Brandon leaned back and said, "I've been thinking about what you said. No one grows if they're always protected." You were right. Losing everything wasn't the worst part. Living without learning would have been. Martha rested a hand on his shoulder. What matters isn't how many times you fall, but that you're brave enough to stand again without help. Lena looked at the garden voice soft. "Mom, because of you, I found myself again. I'm not ashamed to work with my hands anymore. Every dollar I earn means something." Martha nodded. That's true wealth, to take pride in effort, not possessions. Mia looked up. Grandma is being an adult hard. Martha laughed, brushing her granddaughter's hair. Of course, but the harder it gets, the more you'll see how strong you are. Brandon reached into the paper bag and took out an envelope. "Mom, this is our first payment back. It's not much, just $500, but it's honest." Martha didn't open it. She placed her hand over it. "Thank you. I don't need money just to see gratitude lived truthfully." Brandon smiled. "Then you already have it." A soft breeze carried the scent of sweet olive blossoms. Lena showed them a photo she had posted online. The caption read, "Thank you, Mom, for teaching us that love isn't about giving, but about helping someone stand on their own." The post had hundreds of kind comments. No one spoke of the cruel mother anymore, only words of admiration and respect. After clearing the table, Martha returned with 2 wooden boxes. "These are the education funds for Mia and Owen. I've opened accounts for both, but now I want you two to manage them." Lena's eyes widened. "You trust us already?" Martha smiled. "Yes, because you've learned the hardest lesson, responsibility." Mia hugged her. "I love you, Grandma." Owen added softly, "You're the strongest person in the world." Martha laughed, tears glistening. "I'm only strong because of you." As the sky turned golden, Brandon said, "Mom, I just want to say thank you. You might not believe it, but I'm grateful for the fall. Because of you, I finally know who I am." Martha looked at him tenderly. "I believe you. I can see it." At the gate, Lena hugged her mother. "Thank you for loving us in a way that wasn't easy but right." Martha replied softly, "That's the love of someone who learned through loss. Now that you understand, I can rest easy." The gray Honda rolled away slowly. Martha stood watching until its headlights vanished behind the trees. Above her, a silver crescent moon hung in the sky like a promise. She whispered, "Anthony, do you see the kids have grown up?" A cool breeze brushed her face, filling her chest, not with pride but peace. Life had taught her that true victory doesn't come from revenge, but from transformation. She stepped inside, set her teacup on the table, and opened her worn notebook. With steady hands, she wrote her final line, "Forgiveness isn't the end of justice. It's the beginning of love." Martha closed the notebook, turned off the light, and looked out at the quiet garden glowing under the moon, where the rustle of leaves sounded like a blessing for a family finally reunited after 12 long years apart.